Good afternoon, everybody. As Roy said, I am a very passionate believer in learned societies, professional bodies. At least I was until a couple of hours ago when I arrived just before lunchtime. And George on the desk, I believe, is an operator. And in the operating fraternity, if something is late, they describe it as retarded. So George and Rousseau, nice to meet you, Steve. Yeah, the organiser said you were going to be retarded. So here I am. Right, I've got about 45 minutes. I thought I'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of what's going on in the world of track at the moment. Hopefully it'll generate some thought. I caught best part of Sinsin's presentation when I arrived this morning. There are no clever formulas and clever all the clever things that Sinsin. That's why we need very, very bright track engineers to do that sort of thing. This is and there's no videos like Andy's. This is just I've got some graphs and some charts and a lever diagram. I'd been in track for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I'd started to get my head around, this is how track works. And whenever as an engineer, you want to build a model of how your organisation works. And I'd been here a few weeks, and I went on holiday. And while I was on holiday, I came up with a concept of a lever diagram to try and understand what do I need to do to influence the costs within track. And being an engineer, I drew it as a lever diagram, and there's the pivot point. And I put the levers, and I identified 10 levers, and I put them in moment order. So the things that have the biggest effect on our costs are over at this side, and the things that have an effect on cost, but to a lesser extent, are on that side. And for the last couple of years, this has been our sort of guiding plan. It's evolved slightly. It will continue to evolve. We're about to change one of these because we've now really reorganised into specialist teams. So we're about to take number 6 off there and put in materials and haulage and work better with NDS as a new lever. So there'll always be 10 levers, and that's my engineering diagram of how the world of track works on one page. So we'll go through each of those levers. Firstly, and most importantly, is safety. Now, there's three things on my mind, are the 3 things that really worry me on safety. The first is adjacent line open. The second is ballast dust, and the third is fatigue. And I think they are the three things that are the most likely to hurt our track workers. Adjacent line open is becoming more and more prevalent. We work, our job is to keep trains running. We may think that the trains we've got a great big train set for us as engineers to play on, but actually our business is about running trains. And the industry has worked out that we've now got techniques whereby we can run trains past our work sites. So of course the operator's first choice now is can we keep running trains adjacent line open while you do your work? And more we are getting pushed into working adjacent line open. I'd love to, from a safety perspective, from an efficiency perspective, I'd love to shut the railway. The stuff that Andy's demonstrated when we can shut West Coast for 9 days, it's absolutely brilliant. It's very, very productive. As Andy said, we saved £3 million over what we would have done otherwise. But it doesn't happen that often. More often than not, we are working adjacent line open. Biggest risk working adjacent line open is speeding trains. The trains should come past us at 20 mile an hour, and if they come past us faster than us, then our whole safe system of work is compromised. There's been 8 occasions in the last year or so where trains have come through at between 40 and 100 mile an hour. You want to be trying working adjacent line open, and a train comes past you at 100 mile an hour. So we are working on various solutions. We're working on solutions that send text messages to the drivers to remind them that they're coming up again, to some track workers. And we're also looking at technical solutions, which is called a loss POS, which is adjacent line open temporary PTWS, which means we can actually physically put in place a control system which will stop the trains if they are going too fast. Ballast dust How many of you have seen the ballast dust video? Dear me. How many of you received my weekly update? It's good to see you all read it and use the links on it. Right, and actually just the PW, for those of you that don't receive my weekly update, the PWI actually publish them on their website. So if you go into the members area, my weekly updates are published on the PWI website in the form of a blog. So by all means, feel free to pass a comment. I'll often throw things out there that are there for people to comment on, a bit controversial. So by all means, it would be nice to see the community explaining things. Ballast dust, there's a great video now that actually explains everything from the explosion at the quarry to what we see on site. Now, one of the most important things, and you saw it in the video, and you can sort of see it on there, is when very simple things make a big difference. When the RRV scoops the ballast out, the easiest thing for the RRV driver is just to take it out at a sort of parallel with the top of the wagon, open the bucket and drop the ballast 6 or 10 foot. Generates a whole load of dust. It will take him about an extra 4 seconds to lower his arm and drop it from 2 foot. Makes a huge amount of difference to the amount of dust that's created. So a lot of it's about smarter work. There's a ballast dust working group, and that's advising us what to do. Final thing, fatigue management. We are in an industry that works nights and weekends. You know, the time that we get access to the railway is when people don't want to run trains. So typically we work nights and weekends. But we're also in an industry where our back office and headquarters functions work Monday to Friday from 9 till 5. So there is one of probably the biggest risk to the people in this room who are active within the track environment is fatigue. We had the top 60 or 70 people in track together over the last couple of days in Coventry for our sort of management conference. And we asked the question, how many of you have ever found yourself nodding at the wheel? Just, that sort of split second where you wake up and think, bloody hell, I was nearly asleep at the wheel. Nearly everybody in the team put their hand up. And then we asked, how many of you have ever fallen asleep at the wheel and crashed? 6 people in my team put their hand up, which is about 10% of the people in the audience. Fortunately, they're all still with us. Some of our colleagues within the wider industry aren't. It's an issue where, we talk about a lot of safety issues. Fatigue is probably the biggest issue that we face, and we haven't really spent as much time on it as we perhaps should. We've got the hidden limits that go back to Clapham Junction. That doesn't really manage fatigue. It manages working time, and there's a very important difference between working time and fatigue. And so we've put together a group, and we're really going to start to review our fatigue management processes. Next one up, plant reliability. Some of you will be suppliers in the room, and I'll just get in a quick plug. How many of you went to the National Plant Exhibition last summer? Oh, wow, that's good. Well, it's been expanded. It's now not the National Plant Exhibition anymore, National Track Plant Exhibition anymore. It's now Rail Live 2014. It doesn't just cover track. It covers signalling, telecoms, electrification. It is the whole industry getting together. It's like a big country fair for the rail industry. It's free to exhibit and it's free to attend. Hopefully we'll end up with 2 lovely days like we did last time. But it's the industry doing it for itself. So there will be people in this room that can help. For example, Macrail, who do all of our site access controls. They are doing the site access control. We are treating it as a big work site. There will probably be 2,500 to 3,000 people a day attending this work site. It's full PPE, including glasses and hard hat and boots and all orange. But it will be great to see you all there. And it's everything. Everybody contributes for free, and it's the industry doing it together. And if you can't contribute, then we ask for people to say if you can't give in kind by putting on a demonstration or providing barrier fencing or providing a toilet block or whatever, then can you please make a contribution to charity? And last year we made nearly £30,000 for railway charities, which was great. Anyway, that's the plug. Plant reliability. We saw some great videos before with people running at 100 mile an hour, all speeded up. I know that's the speed that Roy and Kevin normally go, but for everybody else, they were going faster than normal. You imagine that video going super fast and everything looks the same, everything stopped. And the reason everything stopped is because the plant is broken down. It's one of our biggest challenges is the plant breaks down, particularly plant breaking down late in the shift. Almost always means that we are off, nearly always means that we overrun. Now, in my previous world, when I was maintenance director, I used to let the plant contracts for Network Rail. And I gave my commercial team a very healthy bonus because they came back and said, Steve, we've screwed 8% off the supply chain for our plant. And I said, really well done, guys. Have yourself a bonus, go out for a beer and get some straws. And for years, and this goes back 25, 30 years, we thought that the answer to plant was constantly, every few years, we'd screw the plant supply chain down. And to be fair, we probably do that beyond the plant supply chain. There's probably a lot of suppliers sitting in the audience thinking, yeah, you do that to us as well. And what we started to realise is actually we rely on a whole delivery system. And if your plant is unreliable, you've completely buggered your delivery system. Immobilisation at the weekend costs about £250,000. It's £250,000 we burn on a site between Friday night and Monday morning. And if for the sake of 20, 30, 40 pound a shift on a piece of plant, that plant breaks down, if it breaks down early, we'll typically half the volume that we do because that's our contingency plan. If it breaks down late, we'll overrun. Some of the more serious overruns that we've had, you can be looking at over £100,000 in compensation to the train companies. All for the sake of us nickel and diming on a subcomponent of an overall system. And eventually the penny dropped about this time last year and we said, actually, we have to work with the supply chain because actually we've got what we thought we wanted. We've got cheap plant. And actually that's not what we really wanted. What we really want is reliable plant. So we need to turn the whole industry on its head and we need to get reliable plant. And you can see there, that's real data, that's current data. You can see there we've made a real difference. In the last 6 months, the reliability has improved by about a third, which is great. It's also interesting. Any plant suppliers in there? Good. It's also interesting to notice the difference between the big suppliers and the little suppliers. The little suppliers have responded far more quickly than the big suppliers. I had all the owners together a few weeks ago, and I said, guys, there's three big suppliers in the room and a number of small suppliers, and if this carries on over time, the big suppliers won't be big anymore, and the little suppliers won't be little anymore. Figure it out. So it really is, you can see there, that's real data. I'll give you one thing, Balfour's data is missing, so Ready Power don't look like they've had any shifts. They have had an awful lot more shifts than that. But you can see there, Story Rail took over Caledonian. Caledonian in Scotland, small supplier, absolutely rubbish. Excuse me, anybody who's from Caledonian. They were for a small supplier, they were on the naughty stare on a Monday morning as often as the big suppliers, which takes some doing when you don't have that many machines. Story Rail took them over. I've worked some magic up there. You've got new plant, new facilities up there, new management team in there. Really, really turned it around, which shows what can be done. AP Web on there, you can see there the level of reliability that AP Web have. When we had to pick a supply partner for the 9-day blockade, which Andy described, we chose AP Web. They weren't the cheapest, but they were the most reliable. And that was hugely, hugely important. And it wasn't by accident. If you got Andy Webb up here to do a presentation, he would explain it's reliability by design. They really understood what they needed to do to have reliable kit. Just A, for instance, I think that's a AP Web photograph there. They built stillage units for all of their attachments. You store an attachment like that, the likelihood is you're not going to snag the hoses, you're not going to put any stress on the equipment. It's easier, it's also much faster, easier and quicker to pick it up and hitch it up. That's a clamshell bucket. I took that I took that photograph myself out on site. There was 4 of us with our headlamps trying to put enough light on it to light it up. That's a Quattro. That's a Quattro clamshell bucket. You look at that and you think, you know, the risk of those hoses getting snagged when the guy tries to hitch it up, something not going quite right, and then we wonder why suddenly a hose breaks and your machine's stopped and the job has stopped. So a big passion of mine is to get the plant to be more reliable, and the Real Live 2014 is all part of that, bringing the industry together. Planning and planning lockdowns was mentioned earlier on. I think it was Tim that mentioned just how much things change, and things shouldn't change. We have an end-to-end process. We should be locking things down. It should be fairly rare that things change. We should be, you know, giving things to manufacturers at the right time, and they should be able to, you know, go about their business and know that things aren't going to change. Again, this is pretty much real data, up to date. It was about 10 days old, and you can see while we've made progress since last July, we have still got an awful long way to go. Yeah, I went to the executive a couple of months ago. We were on 19% at T-4, 4 weeks out, actually locking everything down, and we'd got to 36%. And I went to the executive to report on progress. I said, "Great news, guys. We've gone from 19% to 36%. Aren't we doing well?" Got the biggest kick in with the exec. And I said, "Steve, it's rubbish. You've got to get to 100% and you've got to get there fast. And, you know, you may have doubled. You may think you've doubled from 19 to 36, but actually it's still rubbish. And, you know, it's 41 and we're more than doubled, but actually it's still rubbish compared to what we need to get to. We need to be able to lock things down." Massive amount of work going on at the moment, looking at how do we re-engineer the end-to-end process so that we can lock it down. There are 4 things: haulage, access, specification and work method. All 4 things have to be fixed in order to lock your plan. If you change your haulage, then you suddenly find actually your work method has to change, your specification has to change. You change your access, you need your different work method, different specification, different. Everything is related to each other, and those 4 have to come together. So one of the things we are looking at, for example, is can we fix some things? One of the biggest challenges we've got at the moment is actually having certainty of haulage. So we're looking at saying, can we allocate haulage to teams so that the teams have a fixed knowledge of this is exactly what I've got to play with, and then they can build their plan around it. Best example of that is the high output team. High output team know they've got 2 TRSs, 2 track renewal systems, 5 ballast cleaners. That's all they've got. You know, once they've allocated 2 track renewal systems, 1 to L&E and 1 to L&W, if Western come along and say, "We'd like a TRS," they say, "We're full. You can't have it because we've only got 2 and they're both already out." We don't do that in S&C and plain line businesses. We don't do that. We just keep saying to the customer, "Yeah, that's fine. We'll put the request into NDS." You know, this Christmas, we're about 4 or 5 times, or we were a few months ago until we started deconflicting, we're about 4 or 5 times over demand at Christmas. People just say, "Yeah, we'll do that at Christmas." And we've got to start educating ourselves and educating the industry to say, we have a finite capacity to do work. As we do that, the benefit is that it'll start to flatten the peaks. If people know that they can't get in at Christmas, they'll look for other weekends. If they know that they can't get in at weekends, they'll look for midweek opportunities. Something that was mentioned on the journey for S&C, we want to get into a much bigger number of that midweek. Plain line, we want to do an awful lot more midweek. It flattens the peaks, makes it much better for the whole supply chain because suddenly you can give the guys 4 or 5 shifts a week. You can give the machines 4 or 5 shifts a week. Brings the whole cost of everything down. Getting engineering trains to site on time. Again, this is real up-to-date data. A job can't start, typically, until the first engineering train is there. We can do a few bits of prep and setup, but actually, normally, we need the train to start the job. About 60% of our trains arrive on time. Or, looking at another way, 40% of our jobs start late because the train doesn't get there when it should. We've got a real push with working with the routes and NDS to try and get up to about 85% of our trains getting there on time. If you think about the high output train, it gets £200,000 a shift on average for one of the high output systems. At 11 o'clock at night, that's probably the most valuable train on the network. Actually, even at tea time, it's probably the most valuable train on the network. Unless the Queen happens to be out and about at midnight, it should have the most important head code in the country. But it doesn't. I was out with the company chairman. Everybody knew, you got the track director and the company chairman out on site, and they held the bloody TRS to run a passenger train, which must have had about 3 passengers on at 3:30 train at night, and the train was half an hour late, and they knew we were on site. So real challenges in terms of getting engineering trains to site on time. An awful lot of work's been done on this, some really good work going on L&E at the moment, where we're actually starting to get the trains into the timetable. One of the reasons that the trains are late is we plan them so late that they actually aren't in the timetable, and therefore they're relying on sort of best endeavours to get to site, rather than if we can get them put in the timetable, they are properly pathed, the signallers recognise them, then they should get there on time. Competencies and multi-skilling. Really pleased with the 20 track design trainees that started last September, working with as a collaboration across the industry. I think it's a great example of cross-industry collaboration, realising that we are going to need the next generation of designers and investing collaboratively in that. We got 2.1 million of funding for RRV operators. As I now spend a lot of time with with my sub-supply chain, with the RRV companies. And one of the things that they said when we were talking about plant and plant reliability, because you need to get reliable plant, you need to get good operators. We need to start training the next generation of operators, and nobody's training. Because you spend £7,000 to train somebody, and then somebody else next them for an extra £1 an hour. So the thing that they do is they just don't train. So I said, well, I'll go and I'll ask the board of Network Rail if they'll put their hands in their pockets, and we'll train. We'll provide some funding to support the training of the next generation of operators and controllers. The board kindly gave me £2.1 million, and we are about to distribute that into the supply chain. We're getting a lot of lean training. The chairman of Network Rail is passionate about lean. The new chief executive is passionate about lean. I'll tell you what, I am really passionate about lean. If I didn't believe in it before, it's absolutely the thing to do. We have now got lean consultants helping the S&C business, helping the plain line business, and helping the high output business. And they are adding value in spades. It's surprising how much there is to come out. And one of the things that we are looking for in the new contracts is to try and have a lot more reliance on dedicated employees. I think we've got to a point in the industry where we rely too much on contingent labour. And if you have too much contingent labour, you can't invest in them, you can't multi-skill them, you can't train them. I want my new contracts to have a much higher level of direct labour, where we can invest in skills, we can invest in training, we can invest in development, we can invest in that team. I went over to Switzerland 18 months or so ago to see how they do S&C in Switzerland, and they had about half the number of people to what we've got in the UK. Everybody was busy all of the time. They were all multi-skilled. It was difficult to find anybody that had been with the company for less than 20 years. They could all do all the tasks, and they all could just sense what the next job was to do when they'd finished what they were doing, and they just dropped in. It was like watching a ballet rather than watching something in the railway, and that's what we've got to aspire to. Another interesting thing in Switzerland was there was one guy who wasn't doing all of that stuff, and he was the guy that was in the chuck wagon making the hot dogs and the soup to keep the guys fed. And it's something I've been on various sites. Wigan Springs was a good example where we feed the guys, and it's surprising. Although you think, oh, that's a cost because every day you're giving them a £5 lunchbox. it's surprising the extra morale that you get. And also when you come back to the fatigue that we spoke about earlier on, you give the guys something decent to eat halfway through their shift. You know, it reduces the risk of fatigue. And finally, I put on there the role of the PWI. I think the PWI has a massive role to play as the track industry's professional body. I'm really pleased to see the room full today. It's also one of the first, I think probably the first time I've been to one of these sort of meetings where I've walked in the room and I haven't reduced the average age. You know, maybe because I'm getting older, of course, but normally you come to these sort of events, and certainly, you know, in rail industries, in civils and gas, you come to these sort of events, and I feel positively young, and I don't feel positively young today. I feel positively average, and that's great. But we've got to look at how do we, you know, how can we in Network Rail, how can we in the track department of Network Rail, how can we support the PWI? You know, it's something that I'm passionate about, learned societies and professional bodies and supporting organisations like PWI. And I think, Steve, we've got a meeting on Monday, is it, to talk around what we can do to help. Reorganising track delivery. When I first joined about 18 months or so ago, first took over track, we had regional businesses, and each region did plain line, S&C and high output, depending on what was required. In my view, we'd become jacks of all trades and masters of none. And I set about turning us into an organisation of specialist teams. So last September, we split into a plain line team, an S&C team, and a high output team. It was a difficult birth, it has to be said, for the first couple of months. It took quite a lot of getting used to, but now I think it's brilliant. You know, the thing that we are seeing with the specialist teams, the best practice that's getting shared amongst the country, the way that each of these teams are starting to form, I think is absolutely fantastic. Tendering the new contracts. The new track contracts will be awarded on the 29th of April. Oh, that's when the board meeting is. The bidding process finished a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, we got the final bids in. So as far as the bidders are concerned, this is, you know, their bid is now finished. The thing it means for me is, for, you know, the last 12 or 15 months, I've been like a monk. You know, I'm not allowed out. I'm not allowed to talk to anybody in case people think I've got, you know, they're getting preferential information to help them with their bids. And for somebody that I'm very sociable normally, to actually not be able to go and be seen to be talking, I haven't been to any of the industry dinners or anything for about the last 18 months. So, you know, tonight, I can now start to go out with people again. So tonight, when we're finished here, I'm going out for dinner with Babcock. Which will be great to have a beer and a chat with the senior team from Babcock. Last week, I got home and my wife said to me, "Oh, who have you been out with tonight?" I said, "I've just had a lovely dinner with Amy." And she says, "Who the bloody hell's Amy?" It will be, these will be announced, or the winners will be announced on the 29th of April. One of the things that it does draw out, and looking at S&C particularly, there's a lot of investment going on at the moment in terms of things like extra tilting wagons. We've identified, in, you know, the various presentations, that tilting wagons are definitely the way forward. Everybody loves them, and Network Rail are buying a whole load of extra tilting wagons. And we'll go from having 26 tilting wagons, of which 24 are in operation, and we'll probably go up to we'll probably more than double that. We'll have about 60 tilting wagons. Network, you know, all the various projects, we're all buying tilting wagons. But we need to send some very clear signals to the supply chain, and if any of you are from the supply chain, us having tilting wagons doesn't help, because actually, what we said before about the about plant, it's just part of a delivery system. So if we are going to have more than twice as many tilting wagons, we need twice as many Beeston type facilities to actually load the tilting wagons. We need twice as many key-offs to unload the tilting wagons. So there's a whole delivery system that we need, and we need to sort of encourage the supply chain to gear up. Ideally, what I'd like, I've got two S&C businesses, one north, one south. I'd like each of them to be aligned with a series of delivery partners, you know, whether they are plant suppliers, labour suppliers, or manufacturing facilities, so that they can actually develop. What we've got in Crewe was the pilot for what we want. So there is a real collaboration, a real sense of team, and everybody works together. I thought I'd give you some a whistle-stop through some of our technology that we are looking at the moment. Ryla, which is Roy's baby at the minute that he's looking at, and I think the real data guys are here that are looking at us. Really clever stuff. On the back of a train means that we can survey from the back of a train rather than sending guys out onto the track. One of the biggest risks that we face, the number of near misses I've had in the last 18 months, probably 60% of them relate to the activity of surveying. You know, the core shift is relatively safe compared to the prep shift of surveying. So if we can do that, it will potentially take people away from the risk that was associated with surveying. Unimogs. I saw that for the first time when I was at Beeston, when Tim mentioned before that we had a great day going around Tim's facility a couple of months ago, and saw a Unimog which was being used to move the tilting wagons about while they were being loaded up. And I've just got this vision, because we really struggle for site drivers. A, they're expensive, and B, they're in very short supply, of having a mile-long train, American-style train, or a kilometre-long train. It gets to site, and we split it into 5 pieces, and each of those 5 pieces is about 200 yards long, and each one's got a Unimog. And we use the Unimogs to move them around, and we do that all weekend, and at the end of the weekend, we put them all back together again, and we need a train to take them away. In that whole operation, I need 2 train drivers, and I need 2 engines. But I've had 5 consists moving around site. And it also might allow me, because one of the things I really, really want to see, is I swore to myself one day I would see this, is a train driver with a shovel in his hand. And if I can convince myself that the guy in the front of the Unimog is a train driver, and actually he's a site operative that we've trained to move a Unimog, because they only have to move them a few hundred yards, he might actually get out of his Unimog and get on a shovel. Remote-controlled T-Cod, ZKL, something that we brought in from Holland, just received its product approval a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic bit of kit, means the guys on site using an iPad can send all the signals red, and they are in control of their own protection, which is great. Temporary TPWS we spoke about. We, a few weeks ago, used the high-output ballast cleaner, or the medium-output ballast cleaner on third rail for the first time with the third rail in place. Our challenge for next year is to use the TRS on third rail again, with the third rail in place if we can. NR60 S&C like-for-like footprint, that's worth £10 million a year for me. It's a big challenge for Ian and the S&C asset management team. The reason it's worth £10 million is the ancillary costs. If we put something back in the same footprint, we don't change the signalling system, we don't change the overhead layout. As soon as we stretch something out, and NR60 is currently it's a slightly larger footprint than what we're taking out, we have to change the signalling system, we have to change the overhead system. It puts about £10 million a year onto the cost of doing track renewals. Doesn't add any particular value, but it costs about £10 million extra. So Ian and the guys tell me that they're going to be able to work out how to put NR60 S&C in exactly the same footprint as we're taking out. That'll save about £10 million a year. So that's the great news, and they tell me they've got to do it, which is great. The only bad news is they tell me I've got to wait until 2018. But if I can have it by September, Ian, that would be an awful lot better. High quality installation. I think Andy covered this, so I'll not dwell on it too much. But I have given the team the challenge to move from 80 mile an hour handback to 95 mile an hour handback. The reason it's 95 mile an hour is the standards change at 100 mile an hour. If you want a handback at 100 mile an hour, there's a whole load of different standards. If you want a handback at 95, it's actually the same standards as handing back at 80. And I was going to go for 99 mile an hour to be just under, but they don't do 99 mile an hour speedboards. So challenge is 95 mile an hour. Important thing, which I know Joan Heary, our S&C director, absolutely passionate about, the importance of getting the sub base right. You know, it's hard to believe that we sort of pass a triple whacker over it a few times and think, oh, that'll be good enough. And we've got absolutely no idea exactly what stiffness we've put in. And Andy demonstrated the falling weight deflectometers before. Absolutely fantastic. Very, very simple technology, but just knowing that you've got the right level of stiffness is great. A few weeks ago, at the Taunton and Tiverton blockade, the so-called white ball blockade down in the southwest, I went down to see the guys, and they opened at 80 mile an hour, and I was stood there looking at the curves, and they were absolutely the most beautiful bit of S&C. And I mean, I'm not a qualified speed racer, but I would have signed them back in at 80 mile an hour. It would have been a very safe thing to do because they didn't have any trains because of all the floods. They couldn't actually get any trains. I could have signed them back at 125 mile an hour and nobody would have known. S&C reballasting, hugely important for us going forward. We are looking for technology solutions. The asset managers that look after S&C have worked out we can, you know, if we change the ballast at half-life, we can get an awful lot more life out of the S&C. There are various ways of doing this with vacuum extraction, and but actually the volume of these that we've got to do with 900 units in CP5, we need to look at something that is a very specialist tool for doing that, and we're on with that now. Micropiling. This is a great technique. The Pablo Forteza, who's our engineering director, or the track engineering director, described this as the nearest thing to a silver bullet he's ever seen. It's a great solution. You can micropile between the sleepers. You can do it in between. You can do it in a rules of the route overnight possession. You can do 3, 4, 5, 6, as many piles as you need to do before the trains come back. The top of the piles sit about 500 mil below the bottom of the sleeper, so you can still ballast clean. You can still maintain the track. But they provide, if you go down about 5 meters, they do two things. One is they provide an incredible level of stiffness up to the top infrastructure. The other is they provide a vertical soakaway which provides drainage that goes all the way right down into the substructure and allows the track to drain. So we may be able to cure both formation and drainage problems using a micropiling solution, and then just fix the top 300-400 mil on the top if required. S&C rapid commissioning, often known as S&C plug and play. Where this is going is we will build at facilities like Tim has got at Beeston. We will build up the layout and we will effectively fully commission it, and then we'll seal it all up, and then we'll take it out to site. And instead of having a traditional guys with screwdrivers and crimp tools and Stanley knives and all the various things that you don't really want to see out on site, you get a plug coupler like that. It plugs together on site. We should be able to plug it all together and commission it in less than half an hour, where currently it takes about 5 or 6 hours. The big saving is time, not money. You've still actually got to build the system and commission it at installations like Tim's at Beeston. So you actually still do all the work. It's just the way that you change the methodology, we save about 5 hours of time. That's 5 hours of time where we can run trains, and go back to the point we made earlier on, our job is to run a train service, so that's a great winner. Scope and specification, real tension that we've got. In terms of getting good costs, we like nice big campaigns and we like them in blockades. Wigan being a great example last year of the sort of things you can do. But there's a tension because actually that means we've got people on buses and not on trains. So the train operators would like us to have less than 8 hours access and short work sites and short duration access. And that gives you big costs but allows you to run a much better train service. There is a real natural tension that we need to look at. And one of the things we've got to do as engineers is start and say, is accept we won't always get blockades. We might have to do things in less than 8 hours and we might have to do them in short work sites. So how do we get this expensive block here to be efficient? And that's what Kevin Percival and the guys are working on now. We worked out how to do S&C in 8 hours, and we're taking those same principles of saying, can we do plain line in 8 hours? Can we turn plain line into a factory so that it becomes high outputs little brother, it rocks up and it does 200 yards every night. It's just metronome. It does a string of rail every night, just like the high output. High output will turn up and do 2 or 3 strings. Plain line conventional turns up and does a string in all the difficult to get to locations. And we're already doing it. We're not quite up to 200 yards yet, Kevin, but we'll get there shortly. And the final slide I put up was improved access, which is, and I put what does really good look like. Do anybody, we're fairly far north, do any of you work down in Wessex or work with Wessex at all? It's brill. It really is good to work with. They really are good to work with. Because they are the alliance and they control the train service and they control the infrastructure, they can make trade-offs better than anybody else. So when we took the high output system down, where normally we struggle to get 6 or 7 hours of access, they said, we'll give you 10 hours access. We were working adjacent line open. Now, when you work an adjacent line open, there are times in the shift where you have to stop the trains and go all lines blocked in order to thread the rails through, put the cutter bars in if you work in BCS. There's a whole time where you just need 10 or 15 minutes of all lines blocked. I was out on West Coast a few months ago and we waited 19 minutes while 3 nearly empty trains passed us and a freight train passed us before the signaller gave us access just for 5 minutes because we needed to send some guys live site to thread the rail through. And he said to us, because to the guys in the sharp end, he said, we're all just suits. And he said, Steve, he said, that 19 minutes, that's nothing. He said, last week there was some woman called Diane Crowther. Said we kept her waiting for 57 minutes. And I thought, this is going to be good. Keeping Diane Crowther waiting for 57 minutes while one of her signallers didn't give the high output was the best thing that ever happened. Because L&W have now got really supportive of understanding how they need to work with the signalling community to say to the signallers, when these guys need 10 minutes, it's okay to hold the trains, give them 10 minutes. In Wessex, it was instinctive. So in Wessex, the ES rings the signaller stops the trains, automatically puts the signals to red, says, there's a train in section, as soon as it's gone, line's yours. Other interesting thing, in virtually every route around the country, everybody says, we want higher speeds, we want higher speeds. Why is it 80 mile an hour? Because we can't get to 90 or 100 yet. In Wessex, they say we want 50 mile an hour. It reduces the risk, you can do more work. And in Wessex, we were getting 3 strings a night on jointed track with wooden sleepers. We'd never used the high output train on jointed track with wooden sleepers before, and we were doing 3 strings a night. Once we got onto the CWR, 4 strings a night. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm going down to see the guys. We've called them in for a lunch. I offered them a bottle of champagne if they could, for every production record that they broke. They broke every production record. I dread to think how this was the best, but it was an interesting thing that we learned about Parkinson's law, because they could have finished. I mean, they were absolutely flying. And I spoke to the project manager down there, and she said, we're going to finish just a little bit early, or we're going to finish on time. And I said, why is that? And she said, because if I finish early, I've got no more work for the guys, and there's 60 guys here rely on me for their living, and I'm not going to lay them off. So we're just going to finish on time. And it's an interesting thing that we've got to learn about human nature and Parkinson's law, is we've got to have work ahead of the guys. Because if we don't have work ahead of the guys that they can see it, they will automatically fill their time with the work that they can see. And I suspect that, you know, whether that's in, you know, on the production lines of track, or whether it's in Tim's manufacturing facilities, you know, if the guys can see the work ahead of them, they'll stand up and be counted. If they haven't got the visibility of work, then they'll slow down to make sure they've always got a job. So that's hopefully given you a whistle stop tour through the 10-point plan. It's the way that we manage track. It's the things that are most important to us. And I think it's now time for questions.